So now let me introduce you to loops. There are three fundamental looping constructs in C#. And these are for, while, and for each. For now we're going to focus on the for loop, which is going to handle most of our looping needs in this program. So let's go to this button cheat function and see how we might be able to change it to use loops. Whenever you have several lines of code that look more or less the same, and the only thing that's different is some index, that reeks of a for loop. Okay? So I propose that I can write a for loop and only have one of these lines in it, and use that to set the background color of the for buttons. Okay? And here's how I'm going to do that. What I really want is I want to go through all of the elements in the buttons array and set each button in that array, set its background color to its corresponding secret color. Correct? That's what the cheat button does. It sets our four color buttons to the secret code. Whenever you see lines of code that march through an array, for example, and the only thing that's really different from line to line is the array index, then that reeks of a loop. You can save yourself quite a bit of coding and introducing copy and paste errors and various things by using a loop when you have code that is very repetitive. Okay? Plus, imagine what if we had 10 color buttons. Well, we'd have to copy the same line of code 10 times, right? Okay. So let's convert this code to use a for loop. So the first thing we're going to need is an integer that we're going to use as our step variable inside the for loop, and you will see how it's used in just a minute. So I'm going to create an integer I, and I'm going to initialize it in the for loop, so I don't have to initialize it here. Okay? And then to start a for loop, you begin with the keyword for, and followed by an open parenthesis. Okay? For is not a function. It's not a function, but similar to the if, where we have to specify the conditions for the loop inside parentheses. Now the for actually has three parts inside the parenthesis. And I'm going to write these parts as comments right now, okay? And then I will go back and change them. So I'm going to delete these comments that I made, and we're going to actually fill them in with real stuff. Okay? So I'm going to... So first we look at the code that we're trying to do, that we're trying to replace the for loop with, and we look at the indices. And these are the values that I is going to take on. And what does it start out with? It starts out at 0. So we're going to initialize I with 0. Okay? So we say I equals 0, semicolon. Okay? Now remember, the second part is the continuation condition. We're going to increment, every time through the loop, we're going to increment I by 1, right? Because first it's 0, then it's 1, then it's 2, then it's 3. Oh, and it'll never be 4. Okay? So the condition is I less than 4. As long as I is less than 4, continue looping. Okay? Do not finish the loop, just keep on looping. Okay? So I less than 4. Semicolon. Okay? The last statement is the increment. What do we do to I? Do I want to add 1, subtract 1, add 15? What am I doing? We want to add 1. Okay? And so remember, the easy way to add 1 is I plus plus. And then we finish the parenthesis. Okay? Now, just like an if, the for loop should normally be followed by an open curly brace. But if the for loop only contains one line of actual code, the curly braces are optional. But again, a best practice is to always include the curly brace, just in case. And I'm just going to take this first line of code, this first buttons assignment, and I'm going to delete the remaining 3 because we're not going to need them. And I'm going to change the index to I. Okay? So let me explain what the computer is going to do as it executes this code. So when you click on the cheat button, we go inside the code, it creates a variable I, enters the for loop, initializes I to 0, checks if I is less than 4. 0 is less than 4, so it'll continue. It will not execute this yet. Okay? So it initialized to 0, checked if it's less than 4, which it is. If this is true, if the condition is true, it will go inside the brace and execute the code between the curly braces, which is only a one-line thing. So it'll take index I of buttons, which I is 0. So it'll take the first element in buttons and set its background color to the first element in secret. Okay? Once it's done executing the code between the curly braces, it will then perform the increment statement, which is the third statement in the for loop. Okay? So now I becomes 1. Okay? Then it goes back up to the top of the for loop. It will not execute the initialization again. It only does that the very first time it enters the loop. But now I is 1, correct? Now it compares I to 4. Is I less than 4? Yes. So execute the contents of the loop again. Now I is 1. So now it'll set element 1 of buttons, set its background color to element 1 of secret, right? Once it's done that, and it reaches the end of the curly brace, then it increments I again. I was 1, now it's 2. Go back up to the top. Don't execute this. Just compare it to 4. 2 is still less than 4. Execute this code for 2. Correct? Increment I. Now it's 3. Go back to the top. 3 is less than 4. Yes. Execute this code for 3. For I equals 3. Correct? Increment I. I is now 4. Go back to the top of the for loop. Is I less than 4? I is 4. 4 is not less than 4. Therefore, 4. Therefore, it will not execute the contents of the for loop anymore, and it'll simply move on to the next line of code in the function, which in this particular case, it also exits the function right there. Okay? So let's make sure that our cheat button works. I'm going to debug. Yep, it changed it. So it works. All right. So done with that.